Hello and welcome to episode 43. That's a number of Birdcore. Welcome to Birdcore. Sorry, I'm so nervous. Welcome to Birdcore. Stupid idiot! Stupid!
I mean, like, old people piss their bed all the time. I piss my bed all the time.
You're pissing right now.
My flesh prison needs more inmates.
Have you been hitting the cream?
This is in the Bible.
You're being sold for $14.
Now I might be accidentally baptized next week.
Oh, dude, it's the Ozempic commercial. Beep-a-dee-bop-bop-beep-boop-bee. Beep-a-dee-bop-bop-beep-bo.
Did you get the cowboy butter?
I will inflict you on the sentence. I will inflict on you this. Sorry, I can't read.
If you're watching this, you'll notice that I am not in my living room on my couch. No, I'm not. That's because I'm here in Montreal. That's right. And I have some guests here with me today. If you're watching, maybe the camera has cut to them already. Maybe it's still a surprise. Today's guests are Montreal radio icons. Yes, one of them is my co-creator who helped raise me. And the other one was also pretty much there the whole time for that, except the co-creation part, minus a brief stint out west. The duo worked together for decades on Montreal radio, known primarily for hosting on stations like Mix 96, CJAD, and Shome, which I'm sure my Gen Z audience is very familiar with. They reunited in 2021 and launched Standing By, the Terry and Ted podcast. If you had a perm or a mullet in the 80s, you probably listened to these two. Welcome to the show, Terry DiMonte and Ted Bird, or as I like to call you, Dad.
Nice to meet you.
You have stingers? We have a stinger.
He has a great intro.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Tom and this is the one with Tom and Kit.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
We came up with a stinger last week, but it's not pre-recorded. It's just me going, yeah.
Well, you guys were basically doing that before we started going here. You're
That's
talking
true.
to yourself and
Yeah.
you're doing the old man noises.
Yeah. I'm guessing that regular viewers or viewers of your podcast are looking at it and going, the two old guys wandered into the studio. What's going on?
Yeah.
One of them looks like Sam if he was in a bad accident. One of Sam's mother's friends, shout out to Sari Carper, once described Sam as a good-looking Ted. How's that for a backhanded compliment?
That's
Nice.
funny. Yeah. Oh, well. At least I look like you at all, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah,
I got
no
your sense of
DNA
humor.
tests required.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got your sense of humor, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, he made out like a bandit. He got my sense of humor
And Mom's looks.
and Mom's looks,
Yeah.
and he didn't get any of our bad qualities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
You scored, Sam. Nicely
I guess
done.
so. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you keep going if you want. Like, what other
No,
good stuff?
no.
That's it, eh?
Back to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We're
It's
here.
your podcast. Go.
Yeah, well, it's my podcast, but we're here in your podcast studio
Well,
today.
it's the Pantelis
It's the Pantelis
comedy
yeah.
podcast studio.
Yeah, and it makes sense because we're recording this on the Easter holiday weekend, so that's an opportunity for you to come back to Montreal, and because we have an inn here because this is where we
Yeah,
record
this is where we
our podcast.
do our podcast. Standing by, the Terry and Ted podcast.
But it was your idea to invite us on the podcast. I don't know what you were thinking.
Well, you guys had me on your podcast.
That's true.
Yeah.
But we were looking for perspective from, somebody in your demographic, in your generation, because we're often, old and puzzled on the podcast.
we wanted to do an episode on the new media landscape,
Yes,
and who better
yeah.
to talk to about that than you?
Yeah, because for example, everything I have in my life is due to my association with radio. Everything I have is because I loved and worked in radio for almost 40 years. And now I wonder if anybody even knows what that is. There was a great, Blair Bartram, our good friend in Toronto, went to a Blue Jays game just a couple of days ago. And he had a tiny, tiny old school transistor radio. And he was listening to the play-by-play with, that old school earpiece, like an old 60s style headphone with the wiggly wire that went into the tiny radio. And the kid in front of him said, "Mister, what's that?" And he said, "Well, it's a radio." And the kid looked completely puzzled. He said, "Well, what is that?" And Blair had to say, "Well, it's a radio. I don't know what else to tell you." But the kid was maybe 10 or 11, had no idea what the word
That's
radio
what
meant.
people used to do. They would take the transistor radio to the ball game
Yeah.
and listen to the play-by-play while watching the game at the ballpark.
Yeah, so I think that was the genesis of your dad saying, well, let's have Sam in and see if he can talk about the media landscape. Because interestingly, for me, you're now on television, but not really television. It's not television as I knew television. It's television, which is the new television now, on Street Sense, which is available on millions of platforms and millions of people get to watch it. But years ago, if you wanted to watch Street Sense, you had to put on Channel 6.
Yeah.
And you had to adjust your TV antennas to
that's
make sure
right.
you get the reception.
Yeah. Put it on 12. That was the remote control.
Yeah. Well, I guess that goes to show just how much like digital has really taken over.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Yeah.
you know.
And it's fascinating to us. And I don't spend a lot of time wallowing in the whys and, the details of it, but it's fascinating to us because we, when you get to a certain age, you kind of still live in the realm, like I'm still 35 in my head. You know what I'm saying, Ted?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we, I listen to Spotify. I'm on YouTube every morning. I don't listen to the radio anymore, and that saddens me. And I'm just wondering if I'm in a minority. I don't know how many people.
Probably you're not in a minority in our demographic.
Yeah.
But Sam's demographic doesn't relate. Like,
Right.
I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about coming on here and what we would talk about. And I knew Sam was going to ask us about radio. And, as a kid, I was a big Boston Red Sox baseball fan. And we could watch Red Sox games on TV on the weekend, but we wouldn't get the games during the week on TV. So if I wanted to catch a Red Sox game, I had to listen to it on the radio. And if I wanted to listen to it on the radio, I would have to sit down with the aforementioned transistor radio or the kitchen radio, and I would have to go up and down the dial trying to find a radio station from New England that was carrying the Red Sox game. And if I did get it, it would be in and out and scratchy, but it was magic.
Yeah.
It was absolute magic to go, oh, God, there it is. I got it.
Yeah.
The Red Sox and the Mario's in Baltic.
Yeah.
3-3 in the ninth. Here's Yastrzemski, and there's a long. Game over. What happened? And then I'd have to wait until the next day to see what the score was.
You'd wake up at 7:10 and have to be near the radio at 7:25 when they did sports.
Yeah, to catch the score.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it sounds like I'm painting a picture that an old uncle of mine would have painted about 1910.
Yeah.
Hey, we had to crank the car. We didn't have a key.
But it really was radio then. It was magic.
Yeah,
it was magic when you could sit, for me in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and go up and down the dial, and holy, that's Cincinnati.
Yeah. Well, at night.
Yeah.
Because of cold weather, and I won't get into it because I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, I don't know what the science of it is, but at night you could get stations from all across.
Far away.
Yeah.
So I'd be like lying in bed, and I would be able to hear like WCBS New York. And for a minute, it felt like it was taking me to New York.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was cool.
And it would be in and out. The quality would be. And that's the upside of digital media today is you could listen to any radio station anywhere around the world and have it come in clear as a bell.
Anyway, hang around for more old man stories like these. Sorry, Sam.
No. What I was thinking right there is just watching you guys just effortlessly, the flow of like the back and forth. It almost feels like I was like, I guess I was sitting in live on an episode of you guys and watching you guys. Like, you guys met, 1985, like 41 years ago, if that's math?
Yeah, we met at Bar Scaramouche. A waitress dropped a drink in front of me and said, that's from that guy over there. And it was Terry.
Yeah.
And we were working at competing radio stations. And I had just arrived in Montreal. And so Terry bought me a drink and we introduced ourselves to each other and had a chat. And then we didn't work together until we started together in 88. The morning news position on Terry's show came open, and I thought, I want to work with that guy. I'm going to apply.
That's
for
really
that
cool
job.
because I don't have a strong recollection of that evening at the bar, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I remember being in what was then a very, very competitive business. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to behave like that. A lot of guys wouldn't talk to, other people from other radio stations. And I thought that was a thing to do. And also, I respected his work, and I wanted to know him that. I wanted him to know that. And that's probably why I bought the drink. But it was probably later in the evening, and I probably said, "There's a guy over there drink." But what I do remember was when the job came open, and my boss said, "Ted Bird would like to come and do the news," and we went to your apartment when you were living over
Yeah, it
Joe.
was our upper duplex.
Yeah.
Over Joe and Mary.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
in NDG.
Joe. Joe was a character.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Joe and Mary were, they were, among other things, they were Holocaust survivors, Polish Jews.
Yeah.
10%, among the 10% of Polish Jews who survived the Second World War, moved to Montreal. And I don't know if you knew this, but Montreal, after Israel, I believe, had the second largest Holocaust survivor community immediate post-war.
Didn't know
it
that
either
stat.
went Israel, Montreal, New York, or Israel, New York, Montreal. Anyway,
wow.
huge, huge, relatively speaking, a big Holocaust survivor resettlement community in Montreal.
Nicest people on the planet.
Yep.
Joe and Mary. Anyway, we had a drink, and it was, I don't know, we were there for a half an hour, and it was done. And Ted started to work with us, I think, a month from then, right?
Yeah.
Had to resign and whatever. Anyway, and that there's a, and you're probably understanding this more now that you're in broadcasting. There's a dance and a chemistry that either works or it doesn't. And if you have good instincts, if you have good broadcast instincts, you know right away. Like I was paired over the years with some people where I just knew it was wrong. And the flip side of that coin was when I met your dad, I thought he was incredibly funny and incredibly talented and a really amazing writer. And we got along like a house on fire. And if you can bring that into the studio, that comes through the speakers in the old days of radio. And a friendship ensued, as is evidenced today. Thank you. Shut up, yeah, verbose arts. Anyway, you want to take your show back over, Sam?
Yeah, seriously.
No. I mean, well, I just kind of wanted to know a bit about how, I mean, and you kind of touched on it, of like you either have the chemistry or you don't.
Yeah.
Like nothing is forced. I was reading an article about you guys in the Gazette, and Dad, you were saying, nothing you guys, like it's not a shtick you guys do.
No.
It just flows effortlessly.
Yeah, no, and I've worked with people who, okay, I'm going to say this, and then you say that, and then I'll say this, and then you laugh. Well, no.
Yeah.
If you
But
say
there was-
something I find funny,
There were a
I'll
lot of
laugh.
radio crews that did that,
Yeah.
and that was kind of de rigueur. When I was a kid in the 1970s, there was a lot of that pre-produced, pre-written, that kind of stuff. And I always found that the most entertaining and funniest stuff, that came off of television or radio when I was a kid was stuff that seemed in the moment. You know what I mean? The quick ad libs, you would see. Johnny Carson was famous for it. Johnny Carson, old television host, very famous, had a talk show
The
for
Tonight
1,000
Show.
years. Yeah, legendary guy. And a lot of it was scripted and a lot of it was, pre-written, but he was famous for being quick on his feet. And everybody that I knew that watched, you didn't know it, but you could feel it when you watched it. It was like, I'm trying to think of a close to current example of two people that work really well together in movies or on television. You can feel it when there's tension. You can even like newscasters that didn't like each other, that had to sit at the anchor desk together. You could tell, you could feel the tension between them. And I think the reverse of that is you can feel the friendship and the easygoing nature of two people that get along and aren't You know, when you, as you know now in performing, there's egos involved and a lot of that. When you can hear two people who don't give a shit who gets the laugh, don't care who's, you know, at the top of the marquee, whatever, they just love what they do and they enjoy each other's company. I think that comes through on a podcast, in a radio studio, on a TV show, in a movie, even scripted movies. You can tell when you know, a couple of people are really, really, really getting along. And I think that's a key to anything. Yeah, anybody who listens to podcasts, because as I say on our podcast every week, there's a hillion billion of them. And some of them you listen to and you think, hey, God, you know, either that person, you know, God love them for having a podcast, but they have no skills for communicating, or they don't get along with the people in the studio. I think you can tell that right away. And I think that was part of what helped make us successful in Montreal anyway.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying, especially thinking like with my buddy Tom.
Yeah.
I feel that way with Tom.
Yes.
Big time. Like when Tom and Kit were doing the podcast with me, I mean, Kit as well, but like when I first knew that I wanted to bring back Birdcore, I've done a few stints now, but I texted Tom and I was like, would you co-host this with me? And, you know, we had a bit of a stint. And then, you know, I think, well, I ran out of money to pay for the studio. But
Well, life gets in the way sometimes.
life gets in the way too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Tom is the other Gunther of Gunther and Gunther, by the way. You've
Yeah.
seen Gunther and Gunther,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
yeah, Tom was, you know, the only person I was comfortable doing you know, cosplaying as a German fashion mogul in my underwear. You know what I mean? So yeah, when I think about
you can tell when you're with somebody like that. You know, like I know when to pause when I'm sitting across from your dad and talking to him. I know when to pause, and I can tell. We could tell just by looking at each other where this was going. And that's it's like a dance partner, you know? And that's a hard thing to find, and to recognize it like you have with Tom is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that, I mean, maybe you guys can attest to this, just gets stronger over time too, right?
Yeah, well, the more time you spend together, the more you recognize, like, it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
It's not even a matter of, you know, it doesn't even register in your head, okay, I think Terry's got something to say, so I'm going to pause. You just do.
A friendship grows out of that. In 2008, I was approached by a radio station in Calgary, and we were having a good run. I was going to say we were very popular, but that reeks of, we were great. But at the time, we were doing very, very well ratings-wise and otherwise. And I was having a tough time at work. Within the building, the politics of the building. And I got approached by a Calgary radio station who really threw anything I wanted at me. But they didn't want us together. They just wanted me. And your father sat me down and said to me, do not let our partnership, our friendship, stand in the way of a great opportunity for you. Do not make that decision based on what we have as friends. That's a pretty powerful sign of friendship, and it made what was a very, very difficult decision for me a little bit easier. And as it turned out, you know, it worked out in the end. I went out to Calgary. I lasted almost 4 years before I came back to Montreal, and your dad and I just resumed our friendship from where it started, and then led to the podcast today. So that's I think a tribute to how a working relationship developed into a pretty strong friendship that I still treasure to this day.
Did you guys ever cling on to some hope that after you moved out to Calgary that you guys would end up reuniting? Was that kind of in the back of your head of like, maybe it'll happen
but
again?
the politics were such that wasn't going to happen, because when Terry came back to Shom was being run by someone who was never going to hire me again. It's funny how you tell someone to go themselves, they never hire you again.
No wonder I never heard back from Starbucks.
Business politics with Ted Bird.
Yeah, not my best career move, but certainly the most gratifying 5 seconds of my life.
What do you mean we can't have dinner tonight?
There's crackers in the cupboard.
Oh, that's funny. So what do you guys make of like new age radio these days, because it was such like it was like the golden, industry.
Well, we were lucky because we worked, we worked in the golden era of radio, and we kind of worked into the demise of radio as well. And internet changed everything. And I think that radio made the mistake and continues to make the mistake of not playing to its strengths, which are live, local, and immediate. And, I think that applies to digital media as well. And I think it's part of what has made our podcast, relatively speaking, a success. And Terry made the decision or said to me, we got to make the podcast local. Let's do a Montreal podcast, because we're not going to compete with Joe Rogan and Smartless and these huge, podcasts that get millions of listeners. We're just not going to compete because the landscape is so cluttered. So let's do local.
Yeah, we your father's right. It's hard to imagine, but we worked in an era when you either listened to the radio, and in the morning you bought the newspaper, and at night you watched television, and that was it. There was no internet, no social media. So as a consequence of that, radio was quite powerful at the time that we were in it. And we exited radio. To me, I use the metaphor of, it was like radio was like an airplane, and one engine died just as we were going out the door. And now I think 3 engines are gone and on a 4-engine aircraft, to beat the metaphor to death. But I think one of the things that radio misses, and a lot of podcasts miss, is I think and have always thought that the key to this microphone and where you find this podcast, the key is the person behind the microphone. It's all about the communication. Every radio station had the same records, the same weather, the same traffic, the same shit. What differentiated one radio station from another was content. You hear that word all the time. You hear the word content all the time. Well, back in 1985, our content was different from up and down the dial. That's what made the radio stations we worked for different. And I think that radio's lost that. So radio now is a good friend of mine who's a radio giant in the United States, who is a longtime radio consultant, said he never has observed a business like radio, never observed a business cutting its throat so deeply like radio did. Because radio, he said, when Facebook started, there was no content on Facebook. You had to rely on people who had Facebook accounts to create content, and radio drove all their listeners there, and they still do. Facebook is covered with all kinds of radio teams doing all kinds of cringeworthy,
probably more so Instagram and TikTok.
And TikTok, and it's all instead of connecting with the person at the other end and trying to be that person's, it sounds corny, but their friend. People are thinking that, if they do a text poll about raisins in cookies, that's going to drive engagement and that's going to make people listen to the radio. I think it's all bullshit. You've got to give people a reason to go to the radio station. Nobody in our day, people would say, hey, have you heard Howard Stern? This guy's crazy. And people would go to the dial and go find him and listen and decide whether or not they liked it. And it was the same thing that happened with me when I started at Shome. People would say, have you heard the new guy at Shome and what he's doing? And I get it. It's a different era and whatever. But I think this is a long-winded answer to your question about today's radio has lost the plot with that. I think they don't have high-profile people doing high-profile, interesting, and different things. Jumping up and down and doing what were you doing in the 90s TikTok video, that has nothing to do with communicating and drawing an audience. in my opinion.
And one thing that hasn't changed and will never change, regardless of the medium or the media landscape, is, and Terry talks about connecting with people. Our favorite radio consultant, a woman named Valerie Geller, used to say, and I'm sure she still says,
does, yeah.
the highest compliment anyone can pay you as a radio personality, and this extends to me, to online media influencers, podcast hosts, the highest compliment anyone can pay to you if you're doing anything like this is, I feel like I know you.
Yeah.
Because when they say that, then you know you've connected with them.
And you're probably starting to experience that a little bit, Sam.
A little bit.
When someone recognizes you from Street Sense,
Yeah.
they approach you knowingly.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Sam Bird.
Yeah.
And that means you've made a connection with that person, which that in itself is a high compliment.
And Sam on Street Sense is Sam. That's who he is, and that's huge.
And
that's so key.
That goes back to what I was saying before. I think people can sense that.
Yeah.
I think people know when you're a bullshit artist or you're speaking from the heart. You know, I hate to use the word because everybody uses it now, but authentic.
Yeah.
You're just being yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely have noticed that. Like, people have come up to me and they've been like, Sam from Street Sense, like,
Yeah.
you know, you're so funny. I love when you do the $5 lunch challenges,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And yeah, there is a sense of like a parasocial kind of relationship, which is cool.
And you may already be at this place, but you're going to get to the point where you're going to go, oh, I've been recognized. Have you had that happen yet? Where you can see it coming? It's anyway, that's coming.
Yeah,
that's coming.
okay.
The more it happens, the more you're going to realize, you know, I'll never forget, I did a kids show on CBC in the days of Put It on Channel 6 called Switchback. And I got recognized by kids everywhere I went, like kids who were 12, 11, 8. So anytime there were kids around, I kind of not braced myself, but thought, you know, I could get recognized. A lot of kids here. And then a couple of years later, did a show that was an advocacy show called Fighting Back, Put It on 12. And that show was aimed at a demographic 40 plus, 50 plus. And I remember the first time that transition happened to me, I was in a supermarket and there was an elderly woman, like in her, you know, probably 70s. I thought she was elderly at the time anyway. And she kind of was following me and staring at me. And I was about to say, can I help you?
Yeah.
And before I did that, thank goodness, she said to me, You're the man from the fighting show, aren't you? And I realized that the demographic had changed. And now kids didn't know who I was, but old people did.
I got recognized at the pool the other night while swimming laps.
Really?
By a guy with a big mask and a snorkel. And he went, I kid you not. I kid you not.
One thing that you always taught me, Dad, was because, you know, you had told me you're going to start getting recognized now. And I have, and I've taken your advice of like, no matter how much of a day you might be having, you know, that person thinks it's so cool. They're seeing someone that they've seen online or they see on their phone or on TV or something. And it's like, this is their first impression of you. So, you know, even if you're having the worst day of your life, you better put it together and say, you know, make a good impression, like, so nice to meet you kind of thing like that. So that's something that I actively have like tried to.
Yeah. Well, you come by that
do.
naturally.
Yeah.
Though. I've never, I can't recall seeing you in a bad mood.
Ever?
No.
2016? No.
One from a business point of view, you're representing the brand.
Yeah.
I hate to say that because I sound like an exec, but you're representing Street Sense and your colleagues. But number two, what stuns me to this day is I still get either letters on the podcast or people in the public who said, I met you when you came to our high school in 1988 and I was so excited and I still have your autograph.
Wow.
And I would have no recollection of that moment, no recollection of that person. But what I've come to realize is that person who comes up to you to talk to you about the $5 lunch, they will tell that story for years, long after you've forgotten it. And I've always said it takes just as long to be a dick as it does to be nice.
Yeah.
And you can really, really make someone's day by just being kind and sweet. It takes a minute, maybe two, and it makes their day. And I always thought to myself, and I think your dad did too, how lucky we were to do what we were doing for a living, so that, you know, if a guy who's laying patios from 7:30 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon with a half-hour break for lunch wants to tell me how much he enjoys the morning show when he gets up at 5 a.m., I got time for that person.
And I'm sure it makes you feel better too.
Sure does.
Right?
It's a great compliment, as you know, right?
Yeah.
When somebody says, I love your, you know, this segment you did, or the $5 lunch thing made me laugh, that's a compliment. It's
And
compliment
sometimes
pure.
it can work to your advantage too. I told you the story of I think it was a couple of summers ago when I couldn't drive because I had been diagnosed with epilepsy. So I was on anti-seizure medication. So I couldn't drive for 6 months, but I had to take my car in for some maintenance. So I got my friend Amber to drive, and we were at Sources and Hymas. And as she was rolling up to the red light, she banged into the guy in front of us, driving a really nice BMW. And so he was like, waving his arms. And so we pulled over into a parking lot, and he got out and he went, "Hey, Ted Bird."
Helpful.
Yeah. So we looked at the back of his car. There were no scratches, and his backup camera still worked. So it was, hey, it was great to meet you. And
Just a
and
scratch,
that was
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
not even a scratch.
Have we steered the podcast to
Who
aren't
knows?
we great and famous? I
Yeah,
hope we
yeah.
didn't do that,
Yeah.
Sam.
No, but I mean, I do want to kind of get into, you know, the head of, you know, people who, you guys had like hundreds of thousands, like if not maybe even like millions of listeners. Like people know who you are, and people are bound to come up to you and whatnot. And one thing I want to ask about was when people tell you that, you know, you were there for the highest of highs in their lives and the lowest of lows, like how do you kind of like
Process that?
process that? Yeah, like Terry, I watched a video of you where you were saying, you know, people are telling you that you were there for, not literally, but like the birth of their child, or like when a loved one passed, for example. What is that kind of feeling like to know that somehow you had like an impact on them that helped them, you know, find comfort or, you know, excitement in whatever.
Share those moments.
Yeah, share those moments. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
I only came to realize that much later on in the run, where people would say, you know, my father and I used to listen to you every morning. You know, he would drive me to school, and, you know, we used to love you and Patty and Ted and whatever. And they would talk about, you know, the show and whatever, and then tell me their father had just passed or whatever. Or I would get letters from somebody who said, you know, my son is off to university, and I remember listening to you the morning that we were driving to the hospital when he was born. You don't think of that in the moment. Like when you're on the air in the morning, you never think of that. And the first time it entered my consciousness was maybe a year or two after I started the morning show at Shome. And Patty, who was doing traffic at the time, looked very upset and very forlorn, on the verge of tears. And I, you know, while the record was playing, I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she had been told that a regular caller, because callers used to call in with traffic updates for her, a regular caller that listened every morning was in a fatal accident that morning, and that's why Patty hadn't heard from him. And the woman who told Patty about that said to her, "Your voice was probably the last thing he heard." And that punched me in the face. I'd never thought of it like that. I'd never thought of, you know, that kind of connection that you're making with an audience. But what I came to really appreciate is that's a massive compliment when somebody says, you know, I listened to you for 22 years, and, you know, my kids grew up with you, and, you know, you were around for early morning hockey tournaments, and, you know, you realize that you've become like, inadvertently become part of the family, you know, because they invite you into their house.
They connect you with those life milestones.
Yeah. And when I think about it, you know, I had that same kind of relationship with, because my parents listened to George Balkan, who was a giant of radio when I was in high school. I remember sort of marker moments that I heard from George. It's a weird thing. It's when you think about it, it's kind of like being in the, it's kind of like if Ted and I were at a desk at Arrowhead when it was sold out. That's how many people were listening every morning, and you forget that you're part of the family.
How did you come up with a football stadium in Kansas City?
Well, I was trying to think. I was going to say
what's he talking about? Arrowhead. Oh,
yeah. I was going to say the Big O, but it's just shambles and always falling apart. And it only
they're
holds,
spending $1 billion to replace the roof, aren't
and
they?
it only holds 60,000 people, and we had more people listening to us than
That's
that.
true.
But I
Yeah.
think Arrowhead's nearly 100, isn't it?
I'm not too sure.
Anyway,
what's
up
the
there.
It's up there.
What's the University of Michigan Stadium? That's about 100,000.
Oh, it's like
the one
100.
in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, 100 or 110,000.
So that, yeah. I guess I thought of Kansas City because you can't open up your computer without seeing Kelsey's face everywhere.
That's true, yeah. Yeah. Or Mahomes just signed a new $500 million deal.
Yeah.
That should be the next deal for a Standing By podcast.
And that's
I would think.
When you guys are doing the podcast, you've mentioned this to me before, Dad, is like you don't really have to censor yourself in a way that you may have had to in radio. Do you find that lets you guys, like, does that, I guess it opens it up a lot more for the both of you, right? It's also different because radio is like, you have a little chunk to talk and then, okay, got to go to a song. And then, okay, someone's calling and then,
Commercials.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the radio show was certainly more hectic, for lack of a better term, because you had to, you had, especially for Terry, because he was the host, so he had to adhere to a format, whereas this is way more free form. But I think we still approach it the same way. I don't think we consciously go, okay, well, this is a podcast, so we're going to do it differently than a radio show. What's the same is Terry comes in with a list of topics. I'll have a few as well, but for the most part, he's got all the topics. He's got them written down. He doesn't tell me what we're going to talk about, or if he does, he doesn't, it's not the old, I'll say this, you say this.
Yeah.
It just, he'll introduce the topic and then we'll go.
Yeah, I used to. I was, before the internet, I was a voracious reader. So on Sunday, I'd buy the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the New York Daily News, the New York Post, Time, People, Newsweek, and I would, start plowing through them, and I would clip things out, and I'd put them in a file folder, and I would lay them on the desk, and I'd say to your dad, "You can't look at those," because I wanted to, I wanted the live and in the moment reaction. And I think the podcast is the same kind of thing. When you're a team, someone's got to drive, So because I did that when we were on the radio, I was hosting the show, playing the records, making sure the commercials got played on time, all of those things. And I guess it's kind of the same. I bring in a list of things that I think your dad will find interesting and we can have a good chat about. And I don't tell him about the stuff that we're going to talk about. And, when it comes to the latitude that podcasts provide, I think we've kind of learned, when we first started.
And we're still learning.
Yeah. When we first started podcasting, we're like, we can say, and
I still feel that way.
Yeah. And it comes in handy, but I also think, sometimes I'll listen to other podcasts and I'll think, okay, it's not a bar room, like, dial it back a little bit. I'm not a prude, but if you want to make a really point, a point and you want to curse, you can. But I find if it gets gratuitous, then it's kind of stinky, I think. That's just me.
It's a little bit the same in stand-up comedy. Sometimes the F-bomb can punch up a joke real nicely, but when it becomes gratuitous, it's not funny. It's a crutch.
And one of the things that, radio affected me in so many ways. To this day, I have trouble living in the moment because I spent 35 years thinking 10 minutes ahead. So if I wanted to play Still Loving You by the Scorpions at 7:38, that song was nearly 6 minutes. So that moves you to 7:44. And then you have 3 minutes of commercials. So that's 7:47. And then you've got to get something into the top of the hour. And I find to this day, I have to be everywhere early. And I'm like, even in the shower, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to shave and then I'll take my prescriptions instead of just having a shower. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess I bring some of that to the podcast. I still, after an hour, I start to get a little vibe in my gut where I'm thinking, have we been on too long? Are we talking too much? Is everybody going to hate us? So there's, I guess what I'm saying again in a very verbose way is there are elements of radio that come with it, and there's a freedom that comes to podcasts that we're really enjoying, I think.
You know what I've started doing, and I don't even know why I do it because I'm not in a hurry. I now drink coffee in the shower sometimes. Like I'll have the coffee on the sink right outside the shower, and I'll stick my head out. But the reason is I want to drink it before it gets cold, right? Like I'll pour a cup of coffee and then maybe I am in a hurry. I'll look at my watch. Oh yeah, I got to hit the shower, but I don't want my coffee to get cold, so I'll have it sitting on the sink. That's and I'll just move the curtain aside and bring the coffee into the shower, have a drink.
You're retired. Why not have the coffee after the shower?
I don't know. And another thing, another double task that I do now is sometimes I'll sit down to pee and brush my teeth while I'm sitting there.
That might be hereditary, actually.
Is that too much information? Is that too much information or what? I just thought it was interesting.
No, you take your coffee, 1 cream, 1 sugar, 1 shampoo.
Sit down to pee and brush your teeth.
And brush my teeth while I'm sitting there.
All right.
Oh, you better hope you don't drop any toothpaste down there. It'll sting. And a minty fresh. Yikes. When you guys first started the podcast in 2021, you guys were doing, it was what, I think 10 episodes a season now back then?
Yeah, because Terry was living in Vancouver, so he would fly in for a week and we would record 10 over the period of
5 days.
Of 5 to 7 days.
Jeez.
And we couldn't keep it current like we can now that he lives in Montreal again or north of Montreal again. We do it every week in studio so we can talk about things that are going on now. And I think that has made the podcast much better.
I think so. When we started it, we got sort of not pushed, but we got a gentle nudge from the guy who owns the studio we're in, Pantelis, who has his own comedy channel, by the way, on YouTube if you're looking, and a very, very famous comedian in Quebec named Mike Ward. And they encouraged us. They had us on their podcast because they wanted to know the story of my retirement. And Ted and I were on the podcast to talk about my retirement and our history. And that day they said, you've got to have a podcast. You guys should not be.
We call Pantelis and Mike Ward our podfathers.
Yeah.
Yes.
They got us started. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Yeah.
So we thought we would try it, and I said, I don't know if anybody's going to be interested, and who cares about us? We haven't been on the radio in a while. Anyway, I came in. I flew in from British Columbia, where I was living. After I retired, I wanted to get out of Quebec, so my wife and I made a beeline for British Columbia. And I enjoyed it. We had fun. We did 10. I don't even remember what they were, how they went. We got a couple of sponsors, and it wasn't huge at the beginning, and it's not huge now, but it's growing slowly. And when my wife and I decided that we missed Quebec too much and we wanted to come home, I said to Ted, we could do this every week now. It'll be better. As you know from posting online, if you post content regularly, you keep the pump primed.
Yeah.
If you do 10, like we would do 10 and then release them over a 10-week period in the spring and then do another 10 in the fall, it wasn't enough. I didn't think it was enough. We had fun. It was, it was a good way to start. But I think it's better now that we're doing it on a weekly basis.
And it must have been difficult back then. You're recording 4 in a day. Right?
The most we did in a day was 3, but I don't even want to do 2 in a day.
Yeah.
Even then, by the third, it's
if you're listening to this podcast and you do physical work for a living, you're probably saying, "Oh, you talk for an hour, you But
Carry this cement bag.
Yeah, that's Buddy laying the patio.
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And because I did that for 2 summers, I know, I worked at McDonald's, I worked on construction, I sold ball bearings in an office. I realized how lucky, I worked hard, but I realized how lucky we are to do what we do for a living. And I don't remember what point I was going to make now.
That's okay.
Well, it's just it can be taxing. It's not
Yes.
physically taxing,
Yeah.
but it can be mentally taxing to do
And you
do more than one and to keep it interesting.
And you need a level of sharpness to sit in front of a microphone. I'll never forget this. There was one morning in the radio studio, somebody, I don't remember the circumstances. I think it was a tour, and there was kids in, and, they came into the studio and they were watching, and they watched me, intro a record and turn the mic off and put the headphones down and say, is there any questions? And one kid said to me, that's it? That's all you do? And so I took a breath and I said, what's your name? Whatever his name was, Andy, whatever. I said, Andy, come on over here. And I got up and I said, here, sit here, right here. Okay. I said, okay, now just put your mouth close to the microphone so you can get a feel for it. Okay. And there was a digital timer that was showing how much time was left in the music because we were playing CDs at the time. And I kept talking to him. And when the clock got to 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, I said to him, you see these numbers here? The countdown clock, it's going backwards. I said, okay. And now here, this is the red button. When you push that red button, then you talk and you'll be on the radio. And I pushed myself away from the desk and he looked at me like, where are you going? And I said, no, 15 seconds, go ahead. And 10, 9, and the kid kicked the chair away from the microphone. And I sat back in the chair and extroed the record. And I said to him when it was over, a little more to it than that, right, Andy? And he didn't say anything. And it's one of those gigs, it's one of those jobs that looks really easy, right? If you're watching this, on YouTube, it's like 3 guys just chatting. But there's more to it than that. And there's a lot to being coherent, sharp, articulate, interesting. If you watch a podcast where people have no communication skills and have never done a podcast, pretty quickly. So there's, I guess that's again, a long-winded answer to say doing 2 or 3 in a day is a bit taxing.
Sam was telling me on the way here about tell Terry the story about the red carpet at the Junos. This is a great example of how it's not as easy as it looks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from what I heard, a lot of established media networks who had previously done red carpet interviews or content at the Junos were rejected this year in favor of influencers. Right. Influencers, like some of which are quite polished in interviewing and whatnot, and others are like just have hundreds of thousands of followers.
They're people with phones.
Exactly, yeah. So it's interesting to see like kind of like that shift a little bit of how the influencer is now considered an established interviewer but
has no clue how to interview.
Yeah.
Well, they're not. They've been thrust into that position, but they're not established interviewers. They're people with a large following.
Exactly.
And because you have a large following doesn't mean you have skills that pertain to that industry. And that's what's always bothered me about the way things have gone in the last 10 or 15 years. The companies that run the big places now, they don't think that any kind of talent that you have for communicating or interviewing or broadcasting, they don't think that matters. Just turn on the television at 6 o'clock at night. It's awash in people who can't speak or communicate or interview. And I think that's maybe it doesn't matter anymore, but that it right away.
Yeah.
What the influencers have figured out how to do is amass an audience, which in itself is a skill.
Yeah.
And my hat's off to them for that. But that doesn't mean that they're good broadcasters.
No, because you have that skill to get people to look at your Facebook page or your Instagram, that doesn't mean that you should be granted the opportunity to stop Brad Pitt and talk to him about movies. You know, I don't think, I think the garnering of a following doesn't translate to skill. You know, there's a lot of people with huge followings who don't have a lot of skills.
No, I don't want to see clavicular on the red carpet at the Oscars.
I can't believe you know who clavicular is. Oh my God. That's crazy.
I'm paying attention, Sam.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Old man Bird's paying attention.
Yeah.
Wow, young man Bird.
Well, it's like you and I were talking about the Manosphere documentary.
Yeah.
And,
Well, he's
and-
one of them, right?
Yeah.
Clavicular. Yeah.
and Sneeko.
Yeah.
You know, would you call Sneeko a high level interviewer?
No, sir. No,
He's a guy who's
that
just
is
trying
not
to
a
get
journalist.
attention.
Yeah.
And is doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
In terms of timing, Mano, we got about a 10-minute grace after 12?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Mano's awake, so that's good.
Yeah.
We're not boring him. That's good.
I understand that you brought a tweet sheet today.
I did. The tweet.
I understand you brought a clip.
No, I mean, we have a clip. Yeah. The tweet sheet is something that Terry and I do on the Standing By podcast. And I take 3 tweets or posts off X, as they're now called, per week. And I pick ones that I think Terry's going to find funny. And we play them, or I read them during the course of the show. And I thought, you know, on Sam's show, I thought maybe if people would like a taste of what we do, I said to Sam, well, can I do a tweet sheet on your podcast? And he goes, well, as long as they're not inappropriate.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait a minute, I'm the dad.
Do we not swear on the podcast? Are we being inappropriate?
No, you're being very
This
appropriate.
has been going on since he was 10 years old.
Yes.
Like it's role reversal. It's like, Dad, Dad, you're being inappropriate. Dad, get back in the car, Dad.
You're embarrassing me.
Yeah, that's okay. No, my editor Ben, he takes care of all the censoring
Okay.
and the whatnot, and Ben is the
Okay.
best. I say
Anyway,
hi to
so
Ben.
I brought a tweet sheet and I found 3 that I thought would make both of you guys laugh.
Now that they call it X, what would you call the posts? Are they X's?
I don't know.
If tweets were on Twitter, what's on X?
Who knows? Who cares? It's still Twitter. As far
Okay.
as
Yeah. Well, we always call it Twitter.
X
All right,
Files.
so
Maybe.
so here we go. You ready for the tweet sheet, guys?
Ready.
Going to start with one of our favorites
Oh, I
there
didn't
from
bring the
at
specs.
from
Sorry.
at Kip Conlon. My dream of being a poet vanished like a thing in a whatever. We love Kip Conlon.
Yep.
Yeah. From at Chris V723. I don't know if this is a bacon bit or a scab, but either way, it's delicious.
Both quite salty, I imagine.
Yep.
Oh Christ.
And I love this from at Mike Bove. Average Tom Brady commentary. As a QB, you're looking to see if your receiver has that extra step on the corner and can cut back outside. You're dealing with fine margins, Kevin. Average Tony Romo commentary. You ever think about eating a football, Jim? I have.
Well, that's why Tony Romo is a much better commentator.
Yeah,
I think
Romo's getting slammed, and I don't understand why. I like Tony Romo.
he's
Yeah,
great.
I do too. But
And
do you guys think that's accurate? Like,
well,
is
Brady is very
technical?
yeah because
And
he
Romo's
was,
more down to earth?
Yeah. Brady's because Brady was such a perfectionist. I saw him on one game talking about how you throw the football in the rain. And he was talking about the angle of the football and where you put your fingers and how hard it's raining. And if you throw it at this angle, like he's really, really, he's like a kind of like a scientist with
Right.
football.
And Romo's more
Romo's
leans
like,
more John Madden
A
kind
little
of?
bit, yeah, I
actually,
think
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But he got slammed last year a lot. Slammed on social media.
Wow,
He got
there
slammed.
you go.
But I like him.
I don't understand how Brady is allowed to do commentating while he's also a minority owner of the Raiders.
Yeah,
I don't like. There's a conflict of interest there somewhere.
yeah.
You know,
but
if he's doing a Raiders game, and
it's so Brady. Can
Well,
be-
he's Tom Brady, and at the end of the day, money talks, right?
yeah.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was contemplating coming out of retirement again.
Yeah, I saw that online. I didn't buy because he played some flag football thing, and he tweeted out or put something on social media about
Yeah.
you know,
No,
something like
no,
that.
no, no. He
And of
doesn't-
course, the internet eats that up. Right?
Yeah, he doesn't-
Brady's coming back.
He doesn't
No, he
want to
isn't.
run the risk of ruining his legacy.
No, also,
How old is he at this point? Early 40s?
yeah.
And mid to late. Mid to late 40s, I think.
Yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
He's got a pretty good lifestyle.
Yeah, I saw. It's funny you mentioned that.
go.
I saw a clip of him. I think it was just yesterday, driving down Rodeo Drive
Yeah, I saw that.
in
his
a
Rolls
convertible Rolls Royce.
Yeah, life's good for Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Giants are looking to reunite with Odell, perhaps.
I don't want that to happen. Odell's too old.
He could just sign like a one-day contract and retire. Giants. Nah, he is old though, and he's got no more ACL or Achilles. He's all banged up.
Yeah, no.
We had to step away for a second because there was a second earthquake. But I was just congratulating you guys on hitting your 1,000 subscribers before Caulfield hit 50 goals and Suzuki hit 100 points.
Mind you, it took us 5 years. They've done this all in the same season.
That's true. That's true.
But grazie.
Yes,
Thank
of course. Before we wrap up, gentlemen, I have a segment that I do every week. Given this is Birdcore,
Yes.
every week I ask my guests their core of the week. It could
Phew.
be
I thought you were going to ask me about birds.
no. Well, I when I teed up a previous guest, I said every week I ask my guest. He goes, their favorite bird. Goes to show he listens. No, it's so it can be a core thought you had that week, a core meal you ate, a core conversation, a core value, core. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be one word. You can, it could be a whole sentence. It could be just your core of the past week, whatever it is. Did I explain that well enough?
I think so.
I think so.
Well, I've listened to the podcast.
There you go.
I already gave this some thought. Do you have a core of the week, Tara? Or would
I
you
don't.
like
You
to think
go
about
first.
it? Well, my core of the week is my core of every week, and it's my family. It's my kids. It's you guys. It's you and Charlie and Allie and Lauren. And it's nice that you're in town this week. I'll get to see 3 of you. Lauren lives in Paris, but all 4 are coming to New Brunswick this summer, which I'm very excited about.
You're going to cry.
I know.
And we're going to see.
Your turn.
No, I meant in the summer. I didn't think you were going to cry
No,
now.
right now. Go.
Yeah. It's funny because being able to watch your dad get more emotional as he gets older. I was always a crier. I was like at
And I was always, get a hold of yourself,
yeah,
for
it was
Christ's
like,
sake.
Christ's sake, get a hold of yourself.
Yeah.
Like me at ET.
Yeah, and now I watch an old Flintstones rerun, and Fred gives Wilma a bowling ball for her birthday, and she loves it, and I'm like, oh.
It's funny what brought that in. I don't know what brought
It's
that
age,
in.
I think. You get more sentimental as you get older, I believe.
I've noticed it in you
My
too.
grandfather Bird, I used to go and mow his lawn when I was 13 or 14. He'd give me $5 and then cry when I left.
So it's hereditary.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
When you said meal, I immediately thought of the hot chicken sandwich I had at Chalet Barbecue 2 weeks ago. Jesus Christ. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope this isn't the last hot chicken sandwich I have before I die. Because this is so delicious.
I hope there's no bones in this.
Be kind. I know it's cliche, but be kind.
Nice. Every week, everyone always has very thoughtful cores of the week and very with deep meaning and a lot of thought put into it. My core one week was I was wearing a gray outfit, so it was Groutfit core. It had nothing to do with it. Sham's core the last 2 weeks. She says hi, by the way. Usually she's on each episode.
She's
But
coming to New Brunswick too, right?
she is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, her core the last 2 weeks was bedazzling core because she got this little Amazon bedazzling kit. So she's putting little
gems
on her lip balm.
Wow, that
example.
takes patience.
Oh, she's got it. She's very
Christ.
crafty.
You
Yeah.
want to bedazzle these things? Not really, no. You
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
It takes patience.
I got to think of my core of the week too.
right.
I know every week that it's coming, and I never really have one prepared. But I guess
Is it things like, the first thing I thought of, because we were talking about this earlier, about you getting recognized, it takes just as long to be nasty as it does to be kind.
Oh, yeah.
And the world is getting nastier every week, so that's what popped into my head.
Yeah.
But do you think of whatever pops into your head, or do you come up with one every week?
I kind of think of whatever pops in my head at the time.
That's because that's what I did.
Yeah. And I mean, just thinking, I'm in Montreal right now. I guess family would be the closest, but I guess Easter, Dad's coming over for dinner Sunday.
Yeah.
That
That's nice.
It's so rare that the 5 of us are all together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do
now,
you-
now I'm gonna cry.
Everybody's crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have, do you still get the Montreal buzz when you come?
And what do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean. If you grew up in Montreal, there's a Montreal energy that you feel when you come. But if you live in Toronto for a bunch of years, does that go away?
I guess so.
It does.
I mean,
You like Toronto, eh?
I like Toronto a
Yeah,
lot, but
okay.
you know, I get like the Beaconsfield buzz. You know,
Okay, yeah, because of
So-
where you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I kind of do like when I come into the city, I only see family
Yeah.
or, you know,
boys.
Logan, Alex, Brandon. That's really it. When I first moved away and I would come back, it was like, I got to see everyone I've ever worked with and hung out with. But now it's like, when I come back, I guess the
Now you see the core.
I see
Your
the core. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
whoa. Maybe that's my core.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you'll notice as you get older, you know, I used to think, you know, elementary school, you have a few friends, and in high school, you have a ton of friends, and in CJEP, you have all kinds of friends. And then you go to work, and some of those friends fall away. And as you get older, you end up with just the core of the people that really mean the most to you.
Yeah. Yeah. The small circle.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, guys, I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time. Terry, I appreciate you driving into town to do
Oh,
this. Like,
please.
That's so nice. Dad,
It was easy on a Good Friday. It was
Yeah.
easy. It was my great pleasure. Thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
of
It was
course.
good to meet you.
Yeah.
What'd you say your name was again? You know it's going to be like that someday, eh?
Yeah, it's true. Well, it's kind of like that with Nanny a little bit.
I know.
Yeah,
Poor
God
Nanny.
bless her.
I'm excited because I'm gonna try brushing my teeth on the toilet
There you
later
go.
on today.
Just watch out for the toothpaste.
Have a coffee in the shower while you're at
and
it.
be careful not to get any toothpaste on your wiener.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Quickly, you can find Standing By the Terry and Ted podcast on Instagram at Terry and Ted podcast, right?
At Terry and Ted
I think so,
Podcast on
yeah.
Instagram. Yeah. Actually, the best bet, go to our website, terryandtedpodcast.com.
There you go.
And you'll find all the social media links and all the episodes.
There you go. Ben, can you write that right here? I always talk to Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
terryandtedpodcast.com.
And you can find me at Birdcore Show on all the places, TikTok, Instagram.
He's on all the places.
I'm on all the
Terry.
places.
Have a happy Easter. Nice. family all
Likewise.
together.
Likewise. Let's go get some lunch, shall we?
Very good.
Michelle.
Mano, thank you. That's my boy. All right.